Hello, and welcome to episode 45 of A Book and a Dream. Now, just a few days ago, I had the opportunity to interview Suzanne van Rooyen, who is the author of I Heart Robot, Obscura Burning, Stardust, and The Other Me. Now, I got to talk to Suzanne about her journey in writing, the difference between short stories and novels from an author's standpoint, and, of course, representation for LGBTQ+, genderqueer, and trans characters. Now, it was a very interesting conversation, and some of the best things that we got to talk about were how the representation has changed over the years, how the market is looking now, and most importantly, how you as a reader can support the LGBTQ+, genderqueer, and trans community. And it involves reading some really great books. So that's awesome. You'll see some links with this. Make sure that you check them out before you just go buying all the books on the list, which I know you're going to want to do because some of them are marked as not YA. Now, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily like erotica or anything like that, but, maybe read the blurb really carefully before you hand them to your favorite 13-year-old. That kind of thing. So make sure you check out all the links. On a personal author note, I am thrilled to announce that pre-order for the book 2 in the Guilds of Ilbrea series, Myth and Storm, is now available. You will also find that link with this. Now, before I send you into the interview, I do have a quick word from our friends over at Prince Kai Fan Pod.
Hi. I'm Bethany Finger, the host of Prince Kai Fan Pod, a Marissa Meyer book club podcast. Join me every week during my read-along journey through all of the books by author Marissa Meyer, one chapter at a time, spoiler-free. Each episode will feature a different guest, new fan art, and laughter and joy through reading. You can find Prince Kai Fan Pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all other listening platforms. And now, back to the show.
But yeah, I spent a lot of time near the Into the Wild bus.
Oh my goodness. I'm envious. I would love to go there just as this monument to this paradigm shift.
Welcome to A Book and a Dream with Megan O'Russell, an author's adventure in writing, reading, and being an epic fangirl. Hello, Suzanne, and thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of A Book and a Dream.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, where are you exactly where we're recording this?
I'm living in Helsinki, in Finland.
That is amazing. You are actually my first non-North American guest to have had on A Book and a Dream. So this is very cool for me. I've only been to the Helsinki airport. It was, my only trip there. So that's amazing. It was a beautiful country to fly over. So thank you for making the time differences work so you could chat.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Now, we've sort of been in the same author sphere for a while because you are also a YA author. And I know the blurbs of your books and I know sort of your genre, but what got you interested in becoming a published author?
Oh, in becoming a published author, that's a tricky one. I didn't really have that aspiration. I didn't grow up wanting to be an author at all. And then a friend of mine sort of got me into NaNoWriMo, and I had no idea what this was. And up until that point, I'd only ever written short stories. And then kind of at his encouragement and urging, I attempted to write a novel and failed dismally. But it kind of like sparked something in me that this was something that like anybody could actually do. Like this wasn't reserved for some special sect of ultra intelligent, untouchable people. Like you can write and you can put words together and create a story. And it was through that experience of NaNoWriMo that I started exploring what it would actually take to get published or how to be published and what that kind of meant. And I think as many people do, I started in the world of publishing through short stories and getting a few short stories published before I ever had a novel published.
What was the biggest challenge in transitioning from short stories to novel writing, it's always so interesting to me because I never wrote short stories. Writing short stories is like pulling my hair out. I can't figure out how to make everything fit. So what is it like going the other direction?
Um, I, one of the hardest things in going from short stories to novels, I think, is just the level of world building required, particularly when you're writing science fiction and fantasy. In a short story, it's just this snapshot, and you don't really, well, things should work and they should be logical, but you don't really have to figure out everything. And if it doesn't quite, or if you don't really know how your whole world comes together and all the ins and outs, it's not really that important in a short story because it's so confined. I mean, especially like I'm talking short stories under 10,000 words, under 5,000 words, and having to really delve into world building and understanding politics and economics and like how to actually construct these worlds. That was probably the most intimidating thing between transitioning from short story to novel. And then also just plotting. Like I used to pants, and that's fine for a short story. But when you start pantsing 50, 70, 90,000 words, it can, you can lose your way. You can lose your way pretty easily. And I used to do that. And now, well, actually for the last few years, I didn't really write short stories. I had a bit of a short story hiatus from around 2015. And I was only writing novels, and I kind of refined my process for writing novels. And it was only at the beginning of this year that I was like, you know what? I'm going to write short stories again. And I had to transition back into writing short stories, and it was so hard because suddenly I had to make everything smaller again, and I would have these ideas and I would just start expanding and expanding. I was like, no, it's not a novel. It's not a novel. Like, it's just 5,000 words or even less. And I found that's been kind of the reverse challenge for me this year, is getting rid of all of the excessive world building and character development, because I'm so used to that for novel writing.
Yeah, I love world building, so that's probably actually my problem, and I just never realized it. I'm like, it just won't go in the hole. But it's it's so hard. So we are both YA authors, and I love the young adult genre. It is my favorite place to be. What drew you to the teen and young adult demographic?
I think because I've always been drawn to very dark literature. There was something that was sort of refreshing in YA when I started to read it, that I was like, oh, you don't have to be so cynical or jaded or nihilistic in your worldviews, because I was reading like pretty heavy and grim science fiction and fantasy for the most part. So there was just something like inherently hopeful or positive that these stories ended kind of on more uplifting notes, which was kind of good for my psyche at the time when I discovered YA. And then also just to be able to kind of see the world through fresh eyes, like, for teens particularly, starting to figure out the world, figuring out who they are, and you get to kind of live vicariously through that. In the way of, if I knew now, or if I'd known then what I know now, right? Like, how would I have made different choices, or what might my choices be? And yeah, and
I'm not even that old. I'm in the 30s, and I'm like, oh, it would have been so different 15 years ago if I had known this.
Oh yeah, like for sure. I had a pretty sheltered upbringing, so I did not really get to explore the world until I got into university, into college. I was at, Catholic all-girls school, extremely protected life growing up in South Africa. So yeah, getting to just sort of live vicariously through my characters and see the world differently and explore these what ifs, almost like traveling back in time for myself and exploring these different what ifs. That's kind of what I really like about it.
That is a very cool way to put it. I don't think I've ever had someone answer the question with the what ifs for themselves. That's very cool. And do you find with your YA books, I mean, I'm not sure how much you know about your audience demographic, but do you find most of them are teens, or do you have a lot of adult readers?
Oh, I have interacted with a mix. So I've definitely had interactions with teens, generally older teens, because again, I do tend to write dark as well. But yeah, not sure if I can actually answer that, because a lot of the people who give me the feedback tend to be adults, because they're people within my writing reading circles who read my work, or critique partners, things like this, who I tend to interact with. But then I have initially, I was reading Goodreads reviews, and those were definitely
that's dangerous.
Yeah, that was terrible. That was a lesson learned. But I think they're like probably slightly younger demographic. And as I said, I've had some feedback, like messages from older teens, maybe like 18, 19 year olds, which I guess is kind of the upper teenage reader is who I'm kind of writing for. So that makes sense. But then I've also, because I'm a teacher, and in the school that I was teaching in Sweden, the school found out that I had written a book, and it was my YA book, I Heart Robots. And the next thing is that I saw that it was making the rounds with the grade 5 students.
Oh no!
No, you're 10 and 11. I'm not sure this book is aimed at you. All about like a rebellion for like campaigning for human rights for androids, but it's very much like a trans allegory, and there are trans characters, and it's like a fight for basic human rights essentially, and equality. But it's pretty dark. It can get pretty grim, and then there were these 10, 11-year-olds reading my book and enjoying it, presumably because that's what they said, and I don't know whether they were just trying to make their teacher happy or they were enjoying it. But yeah, so I guess some surprisingly younger readers also.
It is always a little scary when you see readers who are below what you aimed for, and you're like, oh, I mean, I don't know outside of the US if it's as big a problem with parent censorship. I don't know if that's just a special thing we do here, but I always have this terror of like the parent leaving me a horrible review, or the parent like contacting me on Facebook of me being like, I marked it as 14 and up and you gave it to your 9-year-old. I don't know what to tell you. But that is such a real fear for me.
It is scary. I mean, in Europe in general, there's a lot more of a relaxed attitude towards sexual content, but a more strict censorship when it comes to violence. So the issue parents may have is probably not if, there's teen sex scenes, but if there's like really graphic violence or like cruel violence in a book that's aimed at younger readers.
That system makes so much more sense to me, because one is, an inevitable part of life, and the other is something we can really hope we always avoid. But
exactly,
that's a problem with writing, for the YA market. I know for me, most of my readers are adults, which is, pretty standard for my niche of YA, but it always makes me feel better until I see like a little tween holding my book on Instagram, and I'm like, oh no, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Please don't tell your parents. I'm sorry. But yeah, and just a real quick note for listeners on Goodreads. Goodreads can be terrifying, but just know that we have all been in the Goodreads hole where you want to like curl up because people have said some nasty things. So just, scroll them if you must, but never let Goodreads ruin your publishing dreams. Just move on. They can be pretty harsh there. So just, don't be terrified.
And there's a bias there as well. Most people are more likely to be vocal and very vocal about things that they hate than things that they like, just okay. Right. So you're always going to skew towards either the really hateful stuff or the super positive.
Yeah. I love looking at BookBub reviews are actually my favorite because they usually won't even bother if they didn't like it. And then sometimes they'll just click like, it has the options like, I liked the action, I liked the romance. And so they don't have to say anything. So you get a 5-star review that's like, good action, good romance, compelling. And then that's just it. So you can be proud of yourself without having to worry. So it's always a nice little ego boost to look at those. So
I like that.
Yeah, it's great. So you mentioned in I Heart Robot that you have a positive message about the transgender community. And I asked you to come chat with me before, the world sort of blew up with the controversy, which should never be a controversy, but I guess some people just have to be cruel. So most of your books have LGBT plus and trans themes? Is it just I Heart Robot?
I would say most of them definitely have LGBT plus characters, and I guess LGBT plus themes, because it's hard to separate one from the other. The Other Me is a trans story. It's about a trans teen realizing that they're trans and what that is, which is very much drawing from my own personal experience growing up in South Africa, where that sort of vocabulary just didn't really exist at all. I didn't really understand what transgender was until I was into my university years. I Heart Robot definitely has that undercurrent. As I said, it's not really a trans allegory. I think people who read it understand that it's a story about human rights, basic civil rights in general. But there are comparisons made between this call for giving human rights to androids that have become very sophisticated AIs, and what does it take to make us human, and the parallel that's made between the fight for rights with transgender individuals in the world.
And this could be me living as, a cisgender heterosexual woman who lives in, that very privileged, set to the side and just like living with, some chauvinism, but doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be my naivete, but I feel like there aren't a huge number of books in the YA genre when compared to like all the other niches that we're pushing towards that really have that message, or if not message, undercurrent pulling towards that direction. What has that been like for you as an author to reach out into that realm that desperately needs more books, it needs more representation?
Yeah, I think it's something that's always, well, not always, but it's something that's been there a very long time on the indie circuits. So indie publishers have been doing incredible work, publishing diverse voices for almost 10 years. And that was where my books initially found a home, was with indie publishers. I even had agents just tell me categorically they had no idea how to sell my book, The Other Me. Like, at that time, I just don't know how to sell it. This is like a transgender story, and it's set in South Africa. What do I do with it? It wasn't a thing that they believed could sell to traditional, the big five houses then. But there's definitely been a shift. And this year has seen so much fantastic literature bursting onto the YA scene. Just recently, Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, who's a trans writer, made the New York Times bestseller list.
That's amazing.
Yeah, really, that was absolutely epic. And then there's Felix Ever After, which is written by Kaysen Callender. And Kaysen Callender has written other books before, but hasn't really been noticed the same way that this book's Felix Ever After put Kaysen Callender on the map. And that is a trans story. And there's Mason Diva, and so many, and Anna Marie McLemore, who wrote When the Moon Was Ours and The Weight of Feathers, recently came out as non-binary. So all of their books, which have always had these themes of genderqueer, gender fluid, it's just, I think they're there, but they maybe haven't received as much mainstream attention until perhaps given, shift in paradigm with Black Lives Matters, with all this Rowling nonsense that's come about. It's like it's shifted the spotlight onto these books, and that's fantastic because we are getting more, and Big Five publishers are realizing that there's an audience and that these books sell well. And it's not necessarily just this little, trans group of readers who are reading them, but it's actually got a big market for these books because they're fantastic.
I mean, obviously, like, what Rowling has done is completely abominable and, damaging, and it's a betrayal. But it is kind of nice to hear you say that at least this bright spot of getting the trans positive books more out into the world and gaining them more attention, at least, though I'm sure it was not her intention, at least it is having that positive impact, so that adds a little brightness to the world, even though, it's coming from a bad place. And so as a writer within this community, how have you ever had any interactions with your readers that have made you feel, I hate to say important, because obviously you're important, you're a human being, but that have made you feel like, this is making a difference, this is worth it? Have you ever had any of those sort of grand moments that make the toil go?
I mean, yeah, I've had a couple moments like that. I've had some really personal feedback from some readers for whom my books have meant a lot, and they've had some aha moments maybe reading my books. But I think every artist who creates authentically is going to get that reaction from the people who consume their art, because there's an honesty to it, there's a vulnerability in it, and that resonates with people. So it doesn't necessarily make me feel important. It's certainly validating, and it makes me feel good. It makes me think, okay, like, keep going, because people are enjoying what you're creating. But I think anybody can have that. And I think it's important for people to realize that even if they're creating something that feels really strange, like, I don't know, banana skin memes, or like just something completely random that only like tiny percentage of the population is going to be into, you're still going to be able to reach your audience, and people are going to like resonate with that and love it and be your fan and want more, and it's going to be meaningful to them, like really deeply meaningful to them. There are going to be other people who just completely hate it, or not even hate it, which is worse. It's just like be ambivalent, and they're just not going to care about it either way. But yeah, I mean, it is nice when you get positive feedback from people who've read your stories and say, thank you for putting into words what I couldn't, or you made me realize this thing about my life, or just had some sort of positive effect in the world, because there's so much negativity that if you can bring like this tiny little spark of goodness to other people's lives, I think that makes you feel really good.
Yeah, that is always a very nice feeling. And for me, in like my author journey, it's always a little bit strange, because I mean, yes, like every person has their own unique perspective, but I don't have a unique perspective, really. I'm pretty like middle-class, college educated. There you go. Like standard. Got it. But it is always nice when someone says, oh, this is something I haven't seen before. Oh, this is something I hadn't realized. And that is great. Now, I have from you in the pre-interview list that I sent, I have, just to let the listeners know, a full list that she created of books that she would recommend for people who want to give more financial backing to authors who work in the genderqueer and transgender books. And so it's a great list, and I am going to put all of that in the show notes and on the social media posts, because in recognizing that we need more of these books, because, it is a human experience and it should be represented in fiction the way it's represented everywhere else. If you want to support that writing community and support publishers putting more of those books on end caps in Barnes & Noble and giving them good placement so that more people can find them, then, invest in these authors and purchase some of their books, because that is one of the ways we can help get this out there, is by proving that it is commercially viable. Now, on an author sort of slant, and I'll give you a little backstory as to why I'm asking this. This was 10 years ago, which is sort of when, the publishers are telling you that there is not really a place for transgender storylines. There was a lot of, you should not put LGBTQ plus characters in your book unless that is specifically what your book is about, was what I was told through like 5 of my different publishers, was that was just not allowed. And so my way of dealing with it was always knowing in my notes that, he's gay, she's gay. Like, I have it. It's implied, but never going to say it, because otherwise they're just going to edit it out on me anyway. And so as we have lost those sort of restrictions and we're able to include them in books because people have realized that that's ridiculous, it doesn't need to be the theme in order to have representation. What advice would you give to authors who are not necessarily writing transgender, genderqueer, queer-focused books, but want to include these characters? How would you recommend they go about writing it in an honest and inclusive way?
Yeah, I think it is tricky, especially if those authors are not part of that LGBTQ plus community themselves. So if they are cishet authors wanting to include these characters, to include diversity in their books, it would be similar to how white authors don't want to create token characters of color in their stories. And a good rule of thumb seems to be that if you're not writing a story that you, or a character that you share an identity with, it's maybe better not to choose them as the point of view character. And I think, I don't know any authors, particularly white authors, who haven't made that mistake in their career at some point with really good intentions. But I think we know better now, and we can do better now. So perhaps just like the first rule of thumb is, you don't have to make the transgender character your point of view character and try to write them like as your main focus of the story if you don't share that identity, because chances are you're going to get things wrong, even if you do all your research, even if you have trans friends and sensitivity readers. It's maybe just not your story to tell as a cisgender person. But that leaves the door wide open for all of your secondary characters. And you should absolutely populate your world realistically with a diverse cast of characters. But then you do need to be sensitive, and you need to be self-aware of how much you know, how much you can write authentically from a place of personal knowledge. Like maybe you have trans friends or trans family members you can like check in with to make sure that you're using appropriate language, considering different perspectives in the way that you approach certain material in your story. And then just, make sure that you get sensitivity readers from outside of your sphere as well. Because if you give it to a family member or a close friend, they might not say what needs to be said. In terms of if you get something wrong, or maybe they just share such a similar worldview, they might not even pick up on something that somebody who comes from different socioeconomic background or different ethnic background, cultural background, might see potential harm in. And that's also, it is tough. And I think authors these days have the responsibility to do better when they write characters outside of their lane, but at the same time shouldn't be discouraged and shouldn't then whitewash or straightwash their stories out of fear of getting something wrong, but rather try to do your best. And if you don't get something right, listen to that criticism and learn and then do better next time.
I think that straight washing is something that, at least in the United States book community, is something that we face so often. And I know that it has been very damaging to some of my friends in the LGBTQ plus community. Of all of their favorite books growing up, there wasn't even like someone you meet at the grocery store for 3 lines. Like there was no one. And so I think that that is something that, we as authors, we need to do better. And it is going to be a process, but I, challenge all of the authors out there to take the steps and do better, because, that is not only our obligation, but it should be a challenge that we lovingly take on to help and protect the next generation, find representation in, whatever the next Harry Potter is. There should be more inclusion so that we don't ever face this disappointment again.
Absolutely.
So on that same note, people who are just starting off, they have not even gotten to populating their worlds with any kinds of characters yet. What advice would you give to an author who is just beginning their writing journey?
Oh, wow. Don't rush. Have patience, because the industry is convoluted and complicated, and there are so many different paths that you can take towards publication, and they're all just as valid as they are different. And I think there's so many resources now online that help you understand exactly what each of those paths looks like, what each of those paths take, and what the outcome is likely to be. And you really have to be honest with yourself about what you want and how much work you're prepared to put in, because trying to get into traditional publishing is a very different game, almost lottery kind of situation.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's hard. That's just a bitter pill to swallow for many of us, because it doesn't always matter how good your book is. If it's the wrong timing, or if it's something that's too similar to what an editor has already on their list, or, there's just so many reasons why a good book might not sell. But then, if you're going to go into indie publishing and find a small press, you have to be so aware of reputation and what are the hallmarks of a good press and a reputable press and a responsible press, because you can sign away your rights and end up with nothing for it. And it can be a completely soul-destroying experience if you end up signing with a press that just takes advantage of you. And then with self-publishing, you have all the control. And it's a wonderful feeling to be in control of your artistic creations, but it takes so much work, and there's so much business acumen that requires to really excel in self-publishing. So there are lots of different avenues, and my advice to anybody who's starting out is do your research into what these look like, and how to navigate it, and ask for help. As I said, there's so many resources online now. When I started out, I didn't know much of anything, and I was just happy to sign any contract that was going to make me published. That was the important part. And I made some pretty awful mistakes early on that I wish I could go back and fix, but there it is.
Yeah. The earlier mistake experience is so real. Yeah. It's hard. And, if you're interested in indie publishing, make sure you check out Joanna Penn, Joanna Penn, the Creative Penn podcast. If you're interested in submitting, there are entire textbooks on how to get that done, but there are a lot of great resources. And the nice thing, one of my favorite things about the author community is how open they are to sharing their knowledge. There's really not a lot of like, this is my little chunk of knowledge and you shall never take it from me. People are very open to saying, oh, don't do this. Oh, like this is maybe not the best way to query. Oh, you should go about this. Have you read this book? Go to this blog, join this Facebook group. And so I think in a lot of other artistic industries, it can get very competitive and people don't want to share their golden chunks of knowledge. But in the author community, you may not always get an answer, but never be afraid to ask the question, because chances are someone's going to lovingly guide you in the right way, even if they're only sending you a hyperlink. So that is, it's great. So for the final 4 questions, if you could only recommend one book, which would you choose?
Yeah, I saw this question and I've been thinking about it, and I'm no closer to finding an answer today than I was like weeks ago when this question was posed to me, because there's so many different reasons to recommend different books. Like if you just want pure escapism or if you want something that's thought-provoking. But I will say, and it's kind of strange to maybe recommend something that's actually not fiction. This is a non-fiction book. One of the books that dramatically changed my life and really kind of made me take stock and do a hard reset on a lot of my views and goals in life was John Krakauer's Into the Wild. And it's been made into a movie, which is fantastic. Like the movie is really great, beautiful film. But somehow reading the book, it just, that really sort of like shook up my view at the time, or like the definition of success, or how we judge ourselves based on these sort of very strange societal constructs that aren't really real. So yeah, that's maybe one book that really changed my life.
Funny story. I spent 4 summers 20 miles from that bus.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So some people would hike out to it, but it's a very dangerous, people have to get life lifted out of there all the time hike. But yeah, I spent a lot of time near the Into the Wild bus.
Oh my goodness. I'm envious. I would love to go there just as this monument, this paradigm shift.
They actually recently, this summer, I believe, airlifted the bus out.
Oh, right.
They moved it because so many people had gotten hurt and had to be rescued. And I think a couple even died trying to get to the bus. So they airlifted it to somewhere people could visit it more safely and reset it up.
That's wise, but at the same time, a little bit sad to know that's gone. Yeah.
It is, but they had a perfect replica of it at the local brewery so people could take a picture if they didn't want to hike.
That's definitely safer.
Yes, it was great. You could have a beer in your hand and visit the Into the Wild bus. It was the one from the movie.
Okay.
So what song can you count on to pump you up and lift your spirits?
My goodness. Like, music is such a huge part of my life that I have very specific playlists for how I want to feel, very specific songs for how I want to feel. And I think, well, you know what? Imagine Dragons is always kind of guaranteed to make me feel happy. And even Spotify realizes this. Like, if I'm having a day where I just keep skipping tracks and I don't know what I want to listen to, Spotify will start spitting Imagine Dragons songs to me. And it works. Because I'm like, yeah, I'll listen to that. So, yeah, Imagine Dragons, which is not the most unique or interesting band, maybe, but I really like them. And Dan Reynolds, the lead singer, does fantastic work for LGBT+ youth.
Oh, nice. So I didn't know that.
He's a really positive force there and a huge activist for LGBT+ youth. So extra bonus points for supporting Imagine Dragons.
Amazing.
And of course, Linkin Park. That's just such a solid favorite from my formative years, early teenagehood, growing up. So, yeah.
I love that. I love Imagine Dragons. They're great. So what do you want the tagline of your life to be?
So there's this band called Explosions in the Sky, which is this sort of post-rock, shoegazy, kind of ambient, strange music, which I love, and I always include them in my writing playlists. And they have this song called Remember Me as a Time of Day. And I've always just been completely enthralled and enchanted by that. Like, yeah. So I always thought, like, if I had to have a memoir, or if they were going to, like, chisel something into my gravestone, which they wouldn't, because I want to be buried in one of those, like, seed pods so that I turn into a tree.
Nice. That's a good, that is one of my top 3 options for what I want. So that's cool.
Yeah. But if I was ever going to have this, like, you know, epitaph or whatever, then I would have this remember me as a time of day, because I think it's just kind of whimsical and poignant without being sad, and it says a lot without saying much. Like, I don't know. I just like that.
That's great. I think it's beautiful and it works. So what is the most inspiring thing anyone has ever said to you?
So it's actually fairly recently, that, well, this is like inspiring specifically for writing, not like life in general, but specifically for writing, was that I read an interview with this Australian writer called Holden Shepherd, who wrote really good YA book, Invisible Boys, which I forgot to put on my list. He's a gay author, and he wrote this book about these 4 gay boys. And in this interview, he was talking about how his writing mentor had told him the problem he was having with one of his manuscripts that just wasn't working was because he had written from too recent trauma. And this mentor told him, and he was relating the story, that you should write from the scar tissue, not from the wound. And it took me a little while to unpack that, and I was like, that's amazing. Write from the scar tissue, not from the wound. Because if you're still bleeding, if you're still too raw after a life experience, you're not going to have the distance and the perspective to be able to write well about that thing if you're still dealing with it, if you're still in it yourself. So that was a really big, like, aha for me with writing.
That is an amazing piece of advice. I've never actually heard that, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, I just love the way that it was worded. And it definitely makes sense, because we do tend to write from our life experiences. And sometimes I definitely try to write about things where it isn't working. And suddenly this clicked for me, and I was like, yeah, because it's too soon. It's too soon to try to put this into fiction when I'm still dealing with it myself.
Yeah, that those are very wise words. Now, before I let you go, where can listeners find you, your books, your social media, all those wonderful things?
Yeah, so my books are mostly available wherever you find books. So definitely on Amazon, across all the Amazons, wherever you are in the world. Book Depository. And then I think some of the titles, at least Stardust, which is published with Entangled, that should definitely be available in most of the North American stores, or at least be able to be ordered. And yeah, I think the others should be available generally around. I Heart Robot, because that was published by an indie press, and then I got the rights back, and I've since self-published that. That might be the only one that is not as widely available, but that's definitely on Amazon. And all my books are available as ebooks and paperbacks, and a couple are available as hardcovers as well.
Oh, fancy.
And I Heart Robot is also in Chinese. So if you can read Chinese and want to read I Heart Robot in Chinese, that's available too.
You know what? I'm having a Skype meeting with some students from China on Monday, so perfect.
Oh, brilliant. I can send you some links for that if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, and then to find me, I'm most active on Twitter and on Instagram, and my handle is the same on both of those. It's at Suzanne_writer.
Perfect. So I will send people, I will also put those links in the show notes for everyone to make sure that it is easy for everyone to find. And thank you so much for joining us today. This was wonderful and, very educational and informative too, it was great. So thank you so much for coming on A Book and a Dream.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.